do need the wisdom of our coaches. And it is my honor and pleasure to introduce to you Professor John Volmink, who is the president of the Ubuntu Global Network. And Professor, we are always inspired when you speak by your words, and this time on this very deep and profound topic. So I'm honored to call you to the platform to give you your to give us your thoughts, Professor, on this topic. Over to you.
Just want to make sure you hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, wonderful. You have no idea how much inspired I feel every week when I see these wonderful faces and feel your energy. And so it's so beautiful to see here are over 200 people every Saturday who want to live an Ubuntu life. And we co-construct that together. And today we're talking about overcoming obstacles. So I will say a few things, and then I want to relate stories of two friends. The first thing I want to say is that all of us, whether we are rich or poor, whether we are young or old, we have encountered obstacles, and we will continue to be confronted with obstacles in our lives. What is an obstacle? Obstacles are simply barriers that we encounter on our journey in life, but they prevent us. In other words, they impede us from reaching our desired destination. So we're on our way to a particular place, and we come across a barrier. And some barriers are cognitive, and some are barriers to learning. So at school, at university, some of us are experiencing cognitive barriers. Others are psychosocial, such as anger and fear and insecurity. And others are actual physical barriers. So you reach a point in the road where you have to engage with this particular physical object, like a mountain or crossing a river, to get on with your journey. But there are also things such as circumstantial obstacles, such as poverty, very difficult to deal with, but I'm not dealing with the detail of that today. But dealing with obstacles invariably means, whether it's any one of those four that I mentioned and others, when you deal with obstacles, you're dealing with pain. And many people don't like pain, most of us, and I think I have to include myself. So we tend to avoid obstacles because we believe by avoiding obstacles, we will avoid the pain. And by doing that, we live in our own world, because that's not the real world. We live in a world that we had constructed, a world without pain, a world that I call a low commitment world, because when you commit to something and you really work on something, it involves sacrifice, it involves pain. And so we live in a world filled with low-hanging fruits in our minds that we can easily obtain. And so this seminar today has certain objectives, one of which is to acknowledge the inevitability of encountering obstacles in our lives, and to reflect on ways in which we can face and overcome obstacles, whether individually or collectively. So obstacles are a reality. We can't define it away. And we will listen to some real life examples of people who have come across obstacles and learn how they've overcome those obstacles. And thirdly, we must begin to see obstacles not as something negative, only. But we must begin to see obstacle as an opportunity. We must embrace obstacles as an experience from which we can learn always and grow and develop new strengths. So when you engage with the obstacle, you come out differently. Now, there are, as you know, 5 pillars that we always refer to in Ubuntu, and one of them is resilience. And of all those 5 that we had mentioned before, resilience is the one that is probably most closely connected with overcoming obstacles. It is the case that people who grow up in conditions of poverty, in conditions of hardship, from an early age, they've learned to survive, and they've learned to fight to survive. And therefore, they have a pain threshold that is bigger and higher. They can take more pain, generally. More resilient they are than those that grow up easily, because they have mental toughness. Another word for that is grit. They've got grit. So if you learn, if you learn how to fight to survive, you develop this mental toughness. So, but we have to be aware that resilience plays an important role, whether you grew up easily in nice circumstances or not. Maybe you had no trials. You still need resilience, because the real world will always require resilience. So, but I just want to put a word out of caution, that resilience doesn't mean you are a triumphalist and you have an attitude based on an individualism. But when we speak about resilience, it is based on the awareness that we live in a delicate web of connectedness with other people. And it therefore brings me to the importance of connectedness, which is really, we must not forget that as a central theme in Ubuntu. Our ability to cope has to do with our willingness to stay connected to other people and other sources of support. And because in Ubuntu, we deeply believe that you cannot be human alone. So to live without relationships is to deprive you of a very important source of support to overcome problems. To live without relationships is to live in poverty, as I've said before, because real poverty is not the absence of goods and money, but the absence of relationships, the absence of hope, therefore. And living outside of community limits our ability to cope with pain. So if you place yourself outside of community, you want to face it alone, you limit your ability to cope with pain. And therefore you can be a very rich person, but if you don't have relationships, you're actually quite poor. So the other thing is that some people learn from their mistakes and they begin again, but this time more informed, more intelligently. Others find the experience of failing too traumatic, so traumatic that they avoid the possibility of failure all the time. That's not a healthy attitude. If you have a fear of failure, you will avoid effort, you will avoid risk. As a result, you will dislike sudden changes and sudden shocks, and you prefer just routine tasks. And that's the level at which you will operate. But a person who is resilient is one who likes a challenge, who works hard and commits to a task, not because of a feeling of bravado, I'm the captain of my ship, but because in the spirit of Ubuntu, and this is very important, there is a sense of connectedness with others. And I realize that, quote, if I fail, taking a risk. If I fail, because I'm connected with others, there's a strong web of connectedness that is providing a community safety net. The community makes a net, and in which I will land. So in other words, that if I fall, dealing with this obstacle, I will always land on my feet if I'm connected to others. So as we learn to overcome obstacles, there's another term in Ubuntu that we talk about, and that is self-confidence. And self-confidence, if I may briefly say, is related to a statement of value. It's not arrogance. When I say I'm self-confident, doesn't mean I'm arrogant. But it's a statement of value in the sense that when I say I'm self-confident, I'm saying I know who I am and I know my value. I've got value. And my circumstances will not take my value away from me. So building self-confidence is important because it is about focus and about courage, and it's important to stay focused on where you want to go. And I must say, we live in a community that sense of community makes us what we are today. And I just want to come to one more point, but before I do so, Ubuntu is not about going on a personal mission, but it's going on a mission in the interest of the community. I love the former President Bill Clinton's word when he said, Ubuntu, he said in 2006, Ubuntu makes us aware that the world is too small, our wisdom is too limited, our time here is too short to waste time winning fleeting victories at other people's expense. We have now to find a way to triumph together. So as we dealing with obstacles, we must find a way to triumph together. The last thing I want to say is what Maria has referred to, the challenge of forgiveness and reconciliation as major obstacles in many people around the world. There seems to be an inability to overcome hatred and overcome separation. And in this country where I'm sitting, we in South Africa faced generations of hatred between races, particularly, and ethnic groups. And in particular, we had generations of oppression of a black majority and a very small white minority. The white minority, for many generations, were oppressing the black majority. And when Nelson Mandela arrived, he and Archbishop Tutu and others introduced another lens in which we can see the problem of forgiveness and reconciliation. One in which we view wrongdoing. So when you say there's a need for forgiveness, you are acknowledging that there's been some wrongdoing. As one of the ministers here said, you always have to ask yourself, where's the mischief? So there has been some wrongdoing. And so Nelson Mandela introduced the idea that in order to understand that wrongdoing, we need a relational lens, which helps us to understand. But when there is a need for forgiveness and reconciliation, there must be an understanding that harm has been done somewhere to some people or all people, and particularly to human relationships. So when we speak about forgiveness, there's a problem here, and that is the harm to human relationships. And so if we are to be effective in dealing with this obstacle of forgiveness, we need another. We can't just be armed with one weapon, and that is retribution. We need a restorative justice. We can't just have the one weapon of retributive justice. And if that's our only weapon, we will never be able to work towards forgiveness and reconciliation. So when they talk about forgiveness, you ask yourself, where is the hurt? So human relationships have been broken somewhere. We need to focus on repairing the harm that either us have done, as Maria said, or harm that has been done to us, and we must work to restore that. Reconciliation between victims and perpetrators does not guarantee healing, I want to say. But reconciliation is seen as the first step towards healing. The road to reconciliation is based on the belief that the journey starts with opening up the wounds. You may have to open up the wounds to see where's the damage, and so that you can allow some cleansing and eventual healing. And that's risky. It's a risky, if you open up a wound, it's very risky. And it should not be approached carelessly and recklessly. It's risky in the sense that it could lead to deepening divisions and making the wound worse. But at the same time, it's also therapeutic. Therapeutic in the sense that it provides the basis of understanding of what took place and bringing healing. So before I just tell a story, it depends. Forgiveness is about seeking to forgo bitterness and to renounce resentment. It's your choice. You must never be forced to do so. But if you want to give forgiveness or receive, there must be an attempt to forgo bitterness by somebody and to renounce resentment and become a survivor rather than a victim. Because reconciliation goes before forgiveness, and it includes justice, both individual justice and social justice. So I close with a 1-minute account of 2 stories that are examples of overcoming obstacles. I have a friend whose name is Caesar Molabatsi, and his picture is up on the screen. That is Caesar Molabatsi. Caesar is a champion for social justice and youth empowerment, and is a much sought after speaker and a TV personality. I myself had invited him to come and speak at an occasion that I'd arranged. And I noticed that his leg one leg was not the same as the other. And I asked him if it was okay. He told me how, when he was young, he was walking home along the highway to the place which is called Ventersdorp, where a lot of far-right farmers live. And he had a near-death experience at the hand of a white farmer who knocked him down deliberately, and in the process, cutting off one of his legs completely. And he described to me how, while he was lying there in extreme pain and covered in dust and dirt, he heard another pickup truck pull up, and he thought, now they're coming to finish him off. And instead, it was another farmer who also happened to be white, like the first one, who had a similar vehicle, who lived in the same town. But this one, unlike the first one, attended to him, cared for him, and took him to hospital. And today, he's this wonderful leader in our country. And he said, what is the lesson? I said, Caesar, what did you learn from that? And he said, I learned from that tragic event that when you look at a group of people, whether they're all white, all black, or whatever color, when they look the same, but you must never say they are all the same, because people are different. They have a different heart. The last story, 1 minute more, is a student of mine who took a class of mine on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. In fact, that was more than a decade ago. But I spoke to her today, and I noticed that when she was in my class, and I speak about reconciliation and forgiveness, she struck me as a very unhappy and angry person, particularly when I spoke about forgiveness. And so I made the effort to engage her in a conversation and asked her about what is bugging her. And she told me a story. It's too long to say, but simply to say, her father was an activist for the ANC, and they had to flee South Africa and go into a neighboring country called Lesotho, where they lived in fear all the time because he was a sought-after person. They wanted to catch him. And one day, they did catch him in the house. And they took him outside, and in front of his children and his wife, in front of Judith, her sister, and the mother, they tortured the father with all kinds of instruments to the point that his mind snapped. His mind snapped. And until he died last year, after almost 20 years, he was just a vagabond. And people were referring to him. They were crossing the street when he was coming towards them. He looked dirty, as she said. He looked hungry, desperate, and confused. And this is, I will close with this. She says in her paper to me, she says, apartheid has robbed my family of the goodness of knowing what it means to have a father and to have a healthy family. And she goes on. I don't have time to read the rest of her statement, but it touched me then. And that's why I called her today and I said, do I have your permission to share your story? Now, unlike Caesar, she needed much more interaction to overcome because she was stuck. And I said, Judith, you cannot allow this to be the end of your story, where you cry out, because you are giving the enemy the victory over you. So work with me, and it's so great that she's now doing a doctorate in the sociology and family sociology in particular. Father died last year. The mother sends her regards to me, and it's a very good, very special family to me. 2 examples, but there are many more. Thank you very much. I apologize for going over time.